Shut up and sit down.
Welcome to the Answer is Yes podcast, where we will explore the cause and effect of just saying yes in your everyday life or in business. I will dig into topics that are not just stimulating, but will challenge you to be better in everything you do. The podcast is based on the simplicity of saying yes to opportunities you might encounter every single day. I'm your host, Jim Riley. Join me in my first series titled Blue Collar Redefined. Well, here we are in another week of the Answer is Yes podcast. I had a fantastic Labor Day weekend. I hope you did as well. They're never long enough, especially when you've got kids running around the house and the weather's good here in Southern California. That means we've got pool days and all the good stuff to go with it. I actually had a couple of wine parties over the weekend with friends and family and enjoyed some of the amenities of being in the wine business. So anyways, here we are, back another week. By the way, if you have not heard Jim Beaver's show, Down and Dirty, you can find Down and Dirty on iTunes. He does an incredible show. It's not just off-road racing or other, it's just a little bit of everything. So if you're a race fanatic, I know I've got a lot of race friends listening to this podcast, but if you just have an interest in general, check out Jim Beaver's show, Down and Dirty. You can just search it, super easy. Jim is helping me with the production of my podcast, The Answer is Yes. And I just really appreciate him and his efforts. He's always there for me, working late nights, making sure this show comes off well. And he's actually been the guy trying to help me dial in my sound quality over the last few months. So I think we're continuing to get a little bit closer. Okay, well, this week we have an incredible guest. I was really excited about this interview. It came in last minute for me through a publicity company, and her name is Leanne Jacobs. So it is a little bit longer of a show, so I'm not going to dwindle here in the pre, and I'm going to turn it right over to the show recording, and I hope you enjoyed it. I would love to hear from you about what you think of these podcasts, especially this one. So here we go. And welcome to the Answer is Yes podcast. My name is Jim Riley. I'm your host. Thanks for tuning in. We've been having a great time on the show. We've had some wonderful guests, and I continue to get more requests from our listeners to have a different variety of guest speakers on, and I'm thrilled with today's guest. I've got Leanne Jacobs on the line. Leanne, how are you today?
I'm great, thank you.
So I've had a couple of months of seeing your name pop up through your publicist. She's done a wonderful job, and I've bounced in and out of your website. And I just think what you're doing is fantastic. Your website says Holistic Wealth Expert.
Yes, thank you.
I can't wait to hear about that. We have had some successful women on our show already, and I know that there's a lot of accolades on your website and what I've seen about you that guarantees some good content coming out of this podcast. No pressure there. I would love
no pressure.
I would love if you could take us back a little bit in your life when things started and just introduce yourself to the audience and what makes you stand out, because I'm excited to get to the end of the story, but we need to hear the beginning first. So if you don't mind, take us back a little bit.
Yeah, so I am an entrepreneur today, but I was never really exposed to entrepreneurship when I was young. I have twin brothers, and I come from a wonderfully stable family. My dad was a lawyer. My mom was in banking. But I always sort of felt that I didn't fit the mold, at school. And I did well, but I always sort of felt that something didn't feel in alignment for me. And I couldn't put my finger on it, but I continued in education. And I was doing a degree in biomedical toxicology, and I thought I wanted to, go into that. And then in university, my prof came up to me and said, have you ever considered business? And I actually looked at that as almost like an insult, what, you don't think I'm doing a great job? But he said, your skills, do you really want to be in a lab and in research? Your energy seems to be more designed to create. And at the time, I really took that as a negative. But I listened enough to take a moment to question, am I on the right path? And when I look at my education, I always had to work really hard to get good marks.
Uh-huh.
And then I had people around me who, never had to study, and they got 90s. But I had to work so hard, which I'm all about, effort and action. But I did take a second to say, is this my zone of genius?
Yeah.
And so I ended up doing my MBA, kind of learning more about business, and I had a corporate career. I worked for Nike and L'Oreal and Johnson & Johnson. And after about 8 to 9 years in corporate, it really became apparent that I was out of alignment. So for anybody listening who's really good at something they don't love, this is when you can find yourself in a difficult position.
Right, sure.
And I talk to a lot of people. It's like, I'm so good at this. I'm getting amazing recognition. Everybody looks at me as a success. But inside, you feel like a fraud a little bit, because it's like, I know this isn't truth for me, but I'm good at it. And my looking good life seems great because I have success. And that's where I found myself at 28, really questioning those things and wondering, is this going to be my life? And at the time, I was going through a divorce, and things started to kind of fall apart. But I sort of knew that it was supposed to happen, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I knew that I wanted to discover something new that felt more joyful and more fulfilling.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but what were some of the indicators that raised your awareness of, yes, I'm good at this, but this might not be me? What were some of those indicators, or what were you feeling at the time that made you question that?
Well, I think having a visionary thought process is helpful. Like, I think everybody can learn to do that, and it's about making choices today that are going to benefit you 10 years down the road. Mm-hmm. And so I've always had that ability to sort of forecast and look 10 years out, and it didn't feel right, if that makes sense. So predicting, even if I got a couple more promotions and maybe change companies, I looked at what it was going to get me in 10 years, and it wasn't in alignment with my values. So as an example, like, my values are, freedom and health and family and integrity, and those have to be met, or it's going to fall apart at some point.
Yeah.
And I had no time to take care of myself. I'm so grateful for the time that I had, but it wasn't really in alignment with what was most important to me. So, of course, I find for women especially, your body starts to break down to try to give you the message that you're out of alignment.
Right.
And that was true for me. So I sort of had to unravel everything that I thought was success and what I was supposed to do, and had started fresh. Granted, I do find, sometimes if you're really good at what you're doing, even if you don't love it or you don't feel fulfilled, that can be difficult. Or people who are really, really good at a lot of things sometimes get a little bit caught in, I don't know what I'm supposed to do because I love everything,
Yeah.
And so again, that sort of at 28 was sort of, for me, was that mile marker for looking at what are some other options. And I was on the pursuit of, I was really exploring for what else could I do, and what does fulfillment feel like, and what does alignment feel like.
I think that this is a really important lesson for people to hear. I didn't realize this when I asked you for your story early on. I lived a very similar life, 26, making a lot of money. Everybody thought I was successful, but I didn't like my job. The exact reasons, that you just talked about. When you look 10 years down the road, it's not who you see yourself as being. And you talked about unraveling that a little bit. I don't want to tell my story because I've done it already, but I'd like to hear what that unraveling looked like, because I know what it feels like to bring home a paycheck on a Friday from a big league company, and that feels good. But over the weekend, you start thinking, this isn't me. This isn't who I want to be, and I don't see myself as this person. how do we help people identify that within themselves? Because, at the end of the day, you work for some big league companies. It's hard to unravel that. I mean, that, when you think about, I'm working for Nike or L'Oreal, like, how do I not want to be here?
Yes.
How do you go through that process? Do you talk to people? Do you write it down?
And when your whole world is, that's what you know, right? So I think it takes a lot of courage. So what I did is I definitely feel that being in limbo for a little while is helpful. As uncomfortable as it is, and for someone like me who's very action-oriented, being in that limbo space of knowing it's not right but not too sure what comes next, I don't like. I just want it to move quick and know the answer. But I do find everybody tends to go through that limbo phase of like, when you've made that decision that this isn't me and I want something, saying yes, this isn't me and I'm ready to discover what deeper meaning. So you make a yes in your mind, but your external world doesn't change overnight. And so you kind of end up in this limbo space where your head has said yes, but you're still living kind of your old life. So I stayed in that phase where I said yes in my head, but I kept my job. My relationship was we were kind of graduating from it as well, but it didn't happen overnight. So what I did was I actually read a book called The Passion Test.
Okay.
And that was a book that was helpful for me because when you live like a robot and you're just focused on success, doing, having good security, I pay my bills, save, have my social activities on the weekend. It never felt right. It did for me, but unfortunately, I lost my passion. I didn't know what I was truly passionate about because I was so over responsible. That I was doing so many things that I felt I was supposed to do. I didn't know what I really wanted. So that book was kind of opened up my eyes. And the other book that I read was The Magic of Thinking Big. So those were two books that really helped me in that limbo phase of, okay, so I started discovering, okay, well, what are my values? Because I didn't even really know. No one had ever taught, I was really good at setting corporate goals and financial goals in marketing, but I never did that for myself. I never calculated my own ROI for the amount of hours I'm putting into my job. What am I getting in return? And I looked at, a broken body, no time to take care of myself, very little time to see my family. So the ROI was in the negative. And that's one thing, even if you're making $200,000-$300,000 a year, make sure the ROI is there, because if you have to sacrifice your health and your life, you're in a negative ROI. So I started to do actual calculations a little bit on, what do I want my hourly rate to be in my own life? Okay. What do I feel I'm worth hourly? And what do I want my ROI to be? And then I looked at what are my values, and I took the time to identify, my 3 to 4 top values. And that's when I realized money could be made if you take the time to do this properly. What am I supposed to do? Then it breaks down. It's not sustainable because it's not based on who you are. It's based on society and culture, and it could be completely misaligned with who you are, your true self. So I started to look at, okay, well, how could I make money in a more aligned way? And that's when I started to do some exercises. What do I love? What are my passions? And I made a list, fitness, yoga, Pilates, organic foods. I love helping people. I love mentoring. I love leadership. And it didn't happen overnight, but little by little, doors started opening with income streams that were really aligned with my values.
Interesting.
And then I had a mentor, and again, this may not be everybody's philosophy, but it worked well for me because I like to be clear and keep things simple. She had given me a great piece of advice that said, have multiple income streams, of course, but build 1 to 6 figures and then put your energy in the other one. So she said, it doesn't mean you can't, dabble in a couple, but really focus on building 1 to 6 figures. And then, and for me, that really worked well. In my 30s, I really took that philosophy at heart. And I really learned the power of having multiple income streams and also passive income that are in alignment with my gifts and my values and my goals.
Interesting. So utilizing the books to have some